We just started last week confirmation with the youth of our congregation. And I love confirmation. I think it is one of the most exciting and interesting and meaningful things that a pastor can do is to talk about the big questions of faith with young people as they learn what it means to follow Jesus Christ. And I think we don't always tackle those big questions very often, and sometimes we take them for granted. So sometimes it's nice to do that with the young people. And I didn't waste any time last Sunday. We just dove right in to the deep end with this question. Can it be proven that God exists? Wow, Ruben, what are you doing? Come on, give them a chance to dip their toes in the pool before you just dive right in. I know what you're thinking. Thank goodness we're not in confirmation. At least we don't have to answer those questions. Ha, ha, ha. So I thought, hey, why don't we try and answer those questions this morning? I mean, can it be proven that God exists? That doesn't have to be a hard question. The simple and easiest answer is to say, no, it can't be proven that God exists. It's hard enough to prove that you exist. You know, René Descartes, that famous philosopher, devoted his life to proving that he existed. He had a lot of time on his hands. The best he could come up with was, I think, therefore I am. And I'm like, really? I know a lot of people who think they are something. They are not. But I guess that was proof enough for him, although maybe not as convincing for others looking at him. That question, do you exist, became really big in popular culture when the Matrix movie came out. Anybody see the Matrix movie? Some people? Okay, you got to go see the Matrix movie. It was huge when I was in high school. Basically in the movie, the world that everybody thought was real was just a computer simulation. Spoiler alert. The truth was that human beings were all just batteries for AI robots. And so the heroes of the story had to wake up from this sort of reality and find another reality. And after that movie came out, every one of my friends was like, "Is any of this real? Man, how do we know we aren't all just dreaming right now? Do I even exist? Do I have to do my homework then?" And so, yeah, most people say, yeah, you can't prove that God exists, and you also can't really 100% prove that you exist either. So where does that really leave us? Well, I don't think it's such a big deal because if we can't prove something is true, because that doesn't mean, if we can't prove it, it doesn't mean it is not something, it isn't true. There's lots of things that we believe are real that science can't just outright prove exists. I'll give you an example. This example comes from the confirmation book that we're using. Beauty. Can you prove that beauty exists? I mean, I can look out at the snow and I can say, yeah, that's pretty beautiful. Somebody else who has to shovel it will say, no, not so beautiful. Does that mean there's not something that is beauty? Can science measure beauty? Maybe they can, I don't know. They're doing lots of crazy things in science these days. What about love? This is the other example that was given in the book. How do you prove that love exists? I mean, you can look for evidence that two people love each other, holding hands, saying I love you, doing nice things for each other. And you can even get into all the brain chemistry, science stuff of why there's attraction and all that, but you can't really prove that love exists. But most of us would say that love is a thing. And so in a similar way, that's how we look at God. You can't prove that God exists, but we can believe it. And that's what we call faith. And the interesting thing about our faith in the church is that we really agree that you cannot prove that God exists. You can't design some experiment to prove that there is a God. I want you to listen to this quote from the book that the session I've been reading. We were talking about it through Advent. It's called When Church Stops Working. And the authors write, "To say God is to say that which there is nothing greater than. To say God is to say the one who has no beginning and no end, the one who stands completely above and beyond us, the one who is wholly and completely other than all that is. To say God is to say the one who is so grand and great that our minds can't not capture even 0.00000, add a bunch of zeros, 1% of this God's grand greatness. All of this is what we mean when we say God. We mean the one whom nothing greater can be said, the one who is completely and totally other than us and other than all that is. In other words, the authors are saying, we can't know God. It would be like an ant trying to understand astrophysics. So then, the next question is, if God is so unknowable, what are we doing here this morning? What is faith all about then? Should we all just give up, go home? Don't go home. Because no. You see, even though God is unknowable, we believe God has made God's self known to us. And so I'm going to share about 3 ways that God chooses to reveal God's self to us, with the caveat, ant, astrophysics. The first way that God reveals God's self, creation. The Apostle Paul writes this: what can be known about God is plain, because God has made it plain. Ever since the creation of the world, God's eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been seen and understood through the things God has made. Or to put it another way, I'm going to watch a little clip from our confirmation curriculum this morning. I'll get the AV booth to cue it up, about creation and how we know God.
So if we can't prove that anyone exists, maybe we should look for some evidence to see if God exists. Is there any? Well, yeah. The fact that anything exists is evidence that God exists. The level of order in the universe points to the idea that someone ordered it. Hey! Let me explain. Let's say you're walking in the woods, and right in the middle of your path, there is a small pile of sticks. What would you think? Would you think, wow, what a bizarre coincidence that these trees all dropped these twigs into a small pile right in the middle of the path? You'd probably think somebody or something put them there. What if you found a wooden fence? Would you think, how cool that these old trees fell here in a perfect row on top of each other, and somehow they're perfectly notched and intertwined. How random. Of course not. You take all of that evidence, compare it to your past experiences, and logically conclude somebody built this fence. What if you found a log cabin? What if you found New York City?
Hey, I'm working here. Forget about it.
What about the animals and the oceans and the earth itself? What about the solar system and the universe? What about immune systems and cell division and the complexity of DNA? For lots of people, this is all the evidence they need to conclude God exists.
When the video says lots of people, they really do mean lots of people. Do you know that 60% of the world believes in God or a higher power? And another 19% of the world are unsure, meaning that they are at least leaving open the possibility that God exists. That's a whopping 79%. Even 51% of scientists who can provide lots of reasonable explanations for why things are the way they are, 51% of scientists believe in God, and an additional 7% are unsure. And why is that? Well, I don't think you have to look much further than our created world to begin to wonder who created and ordered it all. I love Psalm 8. The psalmist looks up at the stars in the sky and is just overcome with God's majesty, with God's goodness of everything around them. And I think that's because, and we all get that feeling now and then when we look at creation, because creation is one of the ways that God has revealed God's self to us. That's not the only way. The other way that God has revealed God's self, for Christians anyways, we believe that God uniquely revealed God's self in Jesus of Nazareth. And I'll turn to 1 John chapter 4, which we read this morning, where it says, God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. And Jesus corroborates John's assertion, saying to his disciples, if you know me, you will know God too. From now on, you do know God and have seen God. Those first disciples had such an experience of the divine through their relationship with Christ. The things that he did, the things that he said, his death, his resurrection, all of those things revealed to the disciples the very heart of who God is. And it's only because of their witness that we can know that today. We can know God because those who had this experience with Jesus told their stories, wrote them down, and kept them and passed them on to generation after generation. And so if you want to know God, well, all you have to do is read those stories about Jesus. Because Jesus Christ and those who witness to his life, death, and resurrection are another way that God has revealed God's self to us. So we've got creation, and we've got the witness to Jesus Christ. But we don't just have to rely on those two things. There's one more way with these other two that I think are the most important ways that God has revealed God's self to us. And the last is love. Listen again to 1 John 4. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God, and everyone who loves knows God and is born of God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and God's love is perfected in us. I mean, I don't think it gets much straightforward than that. Everyone who loves knows God. That includes the 60% of the world who believe in God and the 21% of the world who don't, and the other 19% who are unsure. That includes the 51% of scientists who believe in some higher power and the 42% who don't. Sure, we can't prove that God exists, but as 1 John says, No one has ever seen God. But if we love one another, God abides in us. So can it be proven? That's a big question. But the answer isn't necessarily that complicated. If you want to know God, take a walk in the forest. Watch a sunset. Stargaze. If you want to know God, read the Gospels. Get to know Jesus. Hang out with his followers. If you want to know God, love. Love your neighbor. Love your enemy. Love yourself. And somehow, some way, it's a mystery, but you will know God, the one who is unknowable. And you'll be able to answer that question for yourself. Does God exist? Amen.